In the heart of the small town of Maplewood, nestled between vast stretches of farmland and thick, whispering woods, life moved slowly. The townspeople were content, lulled into a false sense of security by the quiet, predictable rhythms of their daily lives. The diner on Main Street served the best coffee and pie for miles, and the old theater showed classic films every Saturday night. Children played in the streets, and neighbors waved to each other, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. But on a gloomy Tuesday morning, everything changed. It began when Emily Carter, a local high school teacher, found an envelope tucked under the windshield wiper of her car. The envelope was yellowed and worn, as if it had been lying in the sun for too long. She frowned, glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed. The parking lot was empty, save for a couple of birds pecking at the ground. With a sigh, she tore it open. The note inside was hastily written, the ink smudged as if the writer had been trembling. The government is hiding something. A nuclear strike is coming in 30 days. Trust no one. Emily's heart raced. She read the message again, trying to make sense of it. Nuclear strike. This was Maplewood, a sleepy town that had long forgotten the shadow of war. She scanned the area again, her instincts telling her she was being watched. But there was nothing, only the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. Despite her unease, Emily went about her day. She taught her history class about the Cold War, but her mind kept drifting back to the note. Who had sent it? Why would anyone warn her? Was it a joke, or was there truth in those ominous words? As she watched her students discuss the past, she felt an inexplicable chill creeping up her spine. That evening, she sat at the diner with her best friend, Sarah, a nurse at the local clinic. Over steaming cups of coffee, Emily shared the strange message. Sarah laughed, dismissing it as a prank. Come on, Em, you know how small towns are. Someone is just trying to stir up some drama. Emily forced a smile, but the gnawing feeling in her stomach didn't fade. What if it's true? She whispered, glancing around the diner. The usual patrons were present. Old Mr. Jenkins with his newspaper, the couple in the corner booth, and the waitress bustling between tables. But what if one of them was involved? Let's not get carried away. We've got enough to worry about with the upcoming winter storm, Sarah replied, but her laughter faltered as she saw the seriousness in Emily's eyes. The conversation shifted back to safer topics, but Emily couldn't shake the dread that clung to her like a shadow. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. She kept picturing the note, the hurried scrawl. With every tick of the clock, she felt the weight of time pressing down on her. 30 days felt too close. The following day, Emily returned to school, but her mind was elsewhere. During lunch, she sat alone in the faculty lounge, scrolling through news websites. There were no reports of impending doom or strange government activity, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. After school, she decided to investigate further. She drove to the local library, a quaint brick building filled with dusty books and the smell of aged paper. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly librarian, greeted her with a warm smile. "Hello, dear. What brings you in today?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. "Just doing some research on, well, let's say recent events," Emily replied vaguely. Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. Emily wandered to the back of the library where local history and government documents were stored. She spent hours sifting through dusty files, reading about the town's history, old military bases, and past government secrets. Just as she was about to give up, she stumbled upon a newspaper clipping from the 1980s. It detailed a supposed government facility near Maplewood that had been shut down after allegations of nuclear research. The article hinted at strange disappearances and government cover-ups. Emily's heart raced as she read it. She felt the hairs on her neck stand up. Could this be connected? Just then, she heard the faint sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to find a tall figure standing in the shadows. Tom, the town sheriff, was watching her with a curious expression. "What are you doing here, Emily?" he asked, stepping into the light. Emily hesitated, debating whether to share her fears. "I found something strange. A note about a nuclear strike." Tom's expression darkened. "People have been talking about that. Rumors are spreading like wildfire, but you know how it is, people love a good conspiracy. But what if there's truth to it? Emily pressed, feeling the urgency rise within her. I found this article about a government facility near here that was involved in nuclear research. What if it's connected? Tom rubbed the back of his neck, looking conflicted. I can't say for sure, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. You should be careful about spreading this around. People are on edge already. Emily's heart sank. But what if we don't have much time? Tom sighed, clearly torn. Look, if you find out anything concrete, let me know, but for now, just stay safe. With that, he turned and left, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts. That night, as she lay in bed, she felt a surge of determination. She couldn't ignore the possibility any longer. She had to get to the bottom of it. She had to warn her town before it was too late. Days turned into a week and Emily's anxiety grew. She started noticing changes in the town. People were whispering in corners, casting furtive glances at one another. The grocery store had run out of canned goods, and the gas station was crowded with cars as residents filled their tanks. It was as if the entire town was preparing for something inevitable. Emily decided to host a meeting at the community center to discuss her findings. She sent out flyers, hoping to gather a handful of people willing to listen. When the night of the meeting arrived, she felt a mix of excitement and dread. Would anyone show up? As she entered the center, she was surprised to see a crowd of concerned citizens, all buzzing with anxiety. There were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and even Tom the sheriff. Thank you all for coming, Emily began, her voice trembling slightly. I know this sounds crazy, but I believe we're in danger. I received a note warning of a nuclear strike in 30 days. I found information about a government facility near us that was involved in nuclear research. I think we need to take this seriously. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people looked skeptical, while others seemed genuinely worried. An older man with a weathered face spoke up. This town has faced challenges before, but this, a nuclear strike, that's a bit far-fetched, don't you think? Not if you look at the evidence, Emily replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I've seen the reports and the history. We can't ignore this. The crowd began to argue, voices rising in panic. Emily felt her heart race as she glanced at Tom, who looked uneasy. Everyone, please, we can't afford to panic. We need to stay calm and gather more information. Let's come together as a community and figure this out. As the night wore on, they discussed strategies, forming committees to investigate further. Emily felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could work together to uncover the truth. But as the meeting ended and the townspeople began to disperse, she noticed a stranger lingering at the back of the room. He was tall and thin, with sharp features and a dark coat that seemed out of place. He watched Emily with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Just as she was about to approach him, he turned and walked out, disappearing into the night. After the meeting, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The stranger's presence haunted her, and she decided to do some investigating of her own. She recalled the woods that bordered Maplewood, thick with trees and secrets. Rumors circulated that strange things happened there, and some even claimed it was haunted. The next day, with a sense of dread, Emily ventured into the woods. The sun barely penetrated the dense canopy overhead, casting eerie shadows on the ground. As she walked deeper into the forest, she felt the weight of silence pressing down on her. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. After an hour of wandering, she stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a decrepit building, half hidden by overgrown vines and shrubs. It looked abandoned, yet something compelled her to approach. As she neared the structure, she noticed the faded letters etched into the wood. Government property, authorized personnel only. Her heart raced as she realized this was likely part of the facility she had read about. Gathering her courage, she pushed open the creaking door. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Broken chairs lay scattered across the floor, and the walls were lined with yellowing documents. As she picked through the debris, she found files containing information about the town's nuclear research and experiments that had gone wrong. Her hands trembled as she read about the failures, the cover-ups, and the people who had vanished without a trace. Just as she was about to leave, she heard a noise behind her, a shuffling sound. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned slowly, and her breath caught in her throat. The tall stranger from the community center stood in the doorway, his eyes fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Who are you?" Emily demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. He stepped closer and the light from the doorway illuminated his sharp features. "Someone who knows more than you do. The government doesn't want you to find out about this place, or what's coming." Emily's mind raced. "What do you know? Is there really a nuclear strike planned?" He smirked, a twisted smile that sent chills down her spine. "You're playing a dangerous game, lady, but you're right to be concerned. They've been planning something, and it's not just a drill." Before she could respond, he turned and bolted into the woods, disappearing like a wraith. Panic surged through Emily as she chased after him, branches whipping against her arms and face. But no matter how fast she ran, he was always just out of reach. Finally, she stumbled to a halt, breathless and terrified, her heart racing. When Emily returned to town, she was a whirlwind of energy and fear. She gathered the townspeople again, urging them to take her warnings seriously. "We need to prepare. If there is a nuclear threat, we need to figure out how to protect ourselves." "Protect ourselves?" Mr. Jenkins scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "What do you suggest? We can't just up and leave. This is our home." Emily felt frustration boiling within her. "I'm not saying we leave, but we need to be ready. We can stockpile supplies, find a safe place to shelter. This is real, and we can't ignore it any longer." A heated discussion ensued, with people arguing both for and against Emily's warnings. Just as the conversation grew more chaotic, Tom stepped forward, raising his hands for silence. "I've been in touch with higher-ups in the government. They assure me that there's nothing to worry about. This is just hysteria. We need to calm down." "But Tom," Emily pleaded, "I've found evidence. People are vanishing. There's something they're not telling us." Tom hesitated, glancing around the room. "I'll investigate further, but you all need to stop spreading rumors. You're causing unnecessary panic." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily feeling isolated. Days passed and the air grew heavier with tension. Emily's dreams were haunted by visions of fire and chaos, nuclear blasts lighting up the sky. She felt like she was losing her mind. Every day brought more whispers in town, and the feeling of impending doom loomed over Maplewood like a dark cloud. On the 30th day since she received the note, she awoke with a sense of urgency. She had to confront the government, demand answers. She gathered her courage and made her way to the local government office. As she entered, she was met by the same cold receptionist from before. "What do you want?" she asked, not bothering to hide her annoyance. "I need to speak to someone in charge." "This is urgent," Emily insisted. "Urgent? About what?" The receptionist scoffed, but something in Emily's expression must have made her reconsider. She rolled her eyes and picked up the phone, dialing an extension. After what felt like an eternity, a man in a suit stepped out. "Miss Carter, I'm Agent Collins. I understand you have concerns." Emily took a deep breath. "There's been a warning. A nuclear strike is coming. I need to know if it's true. We deserve to know." Agent Collins regarded her coolly. "There's nothing to worry about. The government is always prepared for potential threats. You're stirring up panic for no reason." "But I found evidence." "Evidence of what?" he interrupted, his tone sharp. "You're grasping at straws, Miss Carter. This town has faced challenges before. You need to focus on what's real." Emily felt anger bubbling inside her. "What's real is that people are disappearing, and you're hiding the truth. We need to prepare." Agent Collins's eyes narrowed. "You need to watch your tone. This is a serious matter." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emily feeling helpless. She knew she had to dig deeper. Returning home, Emily was met with an eerie silence. The streets were emptier than usual, and she felt a growing sense of dread. She tried to call Sarah, but there was no answer. Panic seized her heart. She needed to find her friend. Driving to the clinic, she found the parking lot deserted. Anxiety coursed through her veins as she rushed inside, calling out for Sarah. The silence was oppressive, and the fluorescent lights flickered above her. Just as she turned to leave, she heard a noise from the back. It sounded like muffled cries. With her heart racing, she followed the sound, pushing through the double doors leading to the break room. What she found chilled her to the core. Sarah lay on the floor, unconscious, and beside her stood the tall stranger, now holding a syringe, his eyes dark and wild. "You shouldn't have come here," he hissed, stepping closer. "Get away from her," Emily shouted, her voice trembling. The stranger smirked, backing away slowly. "You're too late, Emily. You've uncovered too much. The government doesn't take kindly to nosy townsfolk. They've been watching you." Emily felt a surge of anger and fear. "What do you mean?" "The countdown is already in motion. They're going to test something that'll make Maplewood a ghost town. You should have listened to me." With that, he turned and bolted out the back door, disappearing into the night. Emily rushed to Sarah, shaking her friend awake. "Sarah, please, wake up." Sarah stirred, groggy and confused. "Emily, what happened?" "You were attacked. We need to get out of here. There's something terrible coming." Together they fled the clinic, Emily's heart pounding in her chest. As they reached the parking lot, Emily's phone buzzed with an alert. It was a government notification. "Emergency alert. A nuclear test will take place in 24 hours. Seek shelter immediately." Emily felt her stomach drop. They were running out of time. Panicking, Emily and Sarah raced back to the community center where the meeting had been held. They needed to gather the townspeople and warn them. As they entered, they were met with a flurry of activity. The townsfolk were in disarray, some packing supplies, others arguing. "Everyone, we need to listen," Emily shouted, trying to command attention. "The government is planning a nuclear test. We have less than 24 hours to prepare." "What do you mean a nuclear test?" Mr. Jenkins barked, looking incredulous. "I received a government alert. They're going to test something right here." Emily's voice trembled with urgency. As chaos erupted, Tom stepped forward, his expression grave. "I've heard rumors about the government's plans, but I didn't want to cause panic. It seems we've underestimated the situation." "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to create a shelter," Emily replied, her mind racing. "There's a cellar in the old church. It should be deep enough to protect us." With a plan in place, the townspeople rallied together, grabbing supplies and rushing to the church. The atmosphere was thick with fear and adrenaline as they worked tirelessly, barricading the doors and gathering food and water. As night fell, the town of Maplewood was a flurry of frantic energy. Emily felt a mix of hope and dread as she watched her friends and neighbors work together. But as the hours passed, an oppressive silence settled over the town, broken only by the distant sound of sirens. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the night, causing everyone to freeze. The front door burst open, and the tall stranger stumbled inside. Panic etched across his face. "You need to leave. They're coming." "Who's coming?" Tom demanded, stepping forward. "The government. They're not going to let you survive this. You need to get out of here, now." Emily felt a wave of fear wash over her. "What do you know? Why are you doing this?" "I know more than you can imagine," he replied, his voice trembling. "They're planning to erase this town from existence. They can't have anyone knowing what they've done here." With that, the stranger collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. Emily rushed to him, her heart pounding. "What do you mean? Tell us what we need to do." Before he could answer, the ground shook violently and the lights flickered. The townspeople screamed, scrambling to hold on to something as the tremors intensified. "It's happening. We have to move," Emily shouted, grabbing Sarah's hand. They rushed to the cellar, descending into darkness as the tremors grew stronger. The air felt heavy with dread, and the sound of chaos above was deafening. Once inside the cellar, they barricaded the door, holding their breath as the world above them seemed to erupt in chaos. Emily felt the walls tremble around her, the ground shaking violently. "Is everyone okay?" she called out, her voice echoing in the cramped space. Nervous murmurs filled the darkness. "What's happening? Are we safe?" someone asked. "I don't know," Emily replied, panic rising within her. "We have to stay together." As the shaking subsided, a heavy silence fell over them. Emily glanced around, trying to gauge the fear in everyone's eyes. They were all terrified, and she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from above, and dust rained down from the ceiling. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," Emily said, trying to stay calm. "But we have to be ready for anything." Minutes stretched into hours, the oppressive silence weighing heavily on their shoulders. Emily felt a gnawing anxiety, the uncertainty of what awaited them above. They huddled together, sharing stories and trying to distract themselves from the fear. Then, a faint sound reached their ears, a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the cellar. The hum grew louder, resonating in their bones. Emily's heart raced. "What is that?" "I don't know, but it's getting closer," Tom said, his voice strained. Suddenly, the ground shook violently again, and the lights flickered, plunging them into darkness. The hum crescendoed into a deafening roar, shaking the very foundation of the cellar. "Hold on," Emily shouted, gripping Sarah's hand tightly. The roar grew louder, and for a moment, it felt as if the world above was collapsing. Emily closed her eyes, praying for survival. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. "Is it over?" someone whispered. Emily opened her eyes, straining to hear anything. "I don't know. We need to stay alert." As they sat in the dark, fear hung thick in the air. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and Emily fought to stay calm. She glanced at Sarah, who was pale and trembling. "Are you okay?" Emily asked quietly. "I'm scared," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll get through this," Emily reassured her, though uncertainty gnawed at her heart. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Tom stumbled in, covered in dust and debris. "We need to go, now." "What happened?" Emily asked, her heart racing. "They're evacuating the town. There's been an explosion at the facility. We need to get everyone out of here." Panic surged through the cellar as Emily quickly gathered the townsfolk. "Everyone, we need to move. Stay close." They rushed through the darkness, fear propelling them forward. As they climbed the stairs, the air felt thick with tension. Emily's heart raced as she led the way, wondering what awaited them outside. As they burst through the door, the world outside was chaos. Smoke billowed into the sky, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The sight was surreal. Fire blazed in the distance, illuminating the night sky in an eerie glow. "Is everyone here?" Tom shouted, trying to keep order amidst the chaos. Emily scanned the crowd, counting heads, but her heart sank as she realized someone was missing. "Where's the stranger?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "I don't know," Tom replied, panic flickering in his eyes. "He must have stayed behind." Before they could react, a loud siren echoed through the night, drowning out their voices. The government vehicles were rolling in, and soldiers emerged, their faces set with grim determination. "Everyone, stay back," a soldier shouted, directing them away from the chaos. "What's happening?" Emily yelled, her heart racing. "We're securing the area. You need to evacuate now." But the townspeople were frozen in fear, unable to comprehend the devastation around them. Emily felt a surge of anger. "We can't just leave. We need to know what's going on." "We're under direct orders," the soldier replied tersely. "You'll be safer away from here." Tom stepped forward, his voice firm. "We need answers. We deserve to know what happened." The soldier hesitated, glancing at his comrades. "There was an incident at the facility, a containment breach during a test. We're not at liberty to discuss details." "Containment breach," Emily echoed, her heart sinking. "Is anyone hurt?" The soldier's expression hardened. "We're assessing the situation, but right now, you need to evacuate." The townspeople exchanged worried glances, the reality of their situation settling in. Emily felt a heavy weight in her chest. She had tried to warn them, to save them, but now it felt too late. "Let's go," Tom shouted, herding the crowd away from the chaos. Emily fell in step with Sarah, her heart pounding in her chest. As they made their way through the chaos, Emily caught a glimpse of the tall stranger standing at the edge of the woods, watching them with a haunted expression. She wanted to call out to him, to understand, but the crowd surged forward, pulling her away. The last thing she saw was his figure disappearing into the shadows, a reminder of the secrets that lay buried beneath Maplewood. Days passed as the townspeople tried to come to terms with the devastation. They were relocated to a nearby town, their homes reduced to rubble. The government promised answers, but Emily felt a gnawing sense of unease. The tall stranger haunted her dreams, his words echoing in her mind. She knew there was more to the story, more that the government was hiding. With Sarah by her side, she began to investigate further, seeking the truth behind the incident. They spent hours researching, poring over news articles and government reports, uncovering a web of deceit and corruption. They learned of the experiments conducted at the facility, the cover-ups, and the warnings that had been ignored. Finally, they stumbled upon a report detailing the government's plans for the facility, a secret program aimed at developing advanced nuclear weapons. The realization hit Emily like a cold wave. This was more than just an accident, it was a calculated risk. Determined to expose the truth, Emily reached out to local news outlets, sharing her findings and demanding answers. The response was swift. Reports flooded in, drawing attention to Maplewood and the government's actions. As the media coverage grew, so did the pressure on the government to respond. Emily felt a sense of empowerment, knowing that they were finally being heard. The truth was coming to light, and she was determined to hold them accountable. In the midst of the chaos, she received an unexpected call from the tall stranger. "You need to meet me," he said, his voice urgent. Emily felt a mix of fear and curiosity. "Why? What do you want?" "I have information that could change everything. Meet me at the old facility," he instructed. Against her better judgment, Emily agreed. With Sarah by her side, they made their way to the ruins of the facility, the air thick with tension. When they arrived, the stranger was waiting, his expression serious. "You need to understand, this was planned. They knew this would happen." "Oh, what do you mean?" Emily pressed, feeling a surge of anxiety. They were testing a new weapon, one designed to eradicate small towns and cover up their tracks. Maplewood was a target, and the explosion was no accident. Emily's heart raced as she processed his words. But why? What do they gain from this? "They want to test their power, to show the world that they can do whatever they want without consequence," the stranger replied, his voice filled with anger. Emily felt a mixture of fear and determination. "We need to expose this. We can't let them get away with it." He nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "But we have to be careful. They're watching us." As they plotted their next steps, Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. She was no longer just a teacher, she was a part of something bigger, fighting against an unseen enemy. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as Emily and the townspeople banded together, determined to fight back against the government's deception. They organized protests, rallied support from neighboring towns, and utilized social media to spread the word. But with each passing day, the government's presence loomed larger. Agents appeared at town meetings, watching them with cold eyes, their intentions clear. They were determined to silence any dissent. Emily felt a sense of urgency building within her. They had to act before it was too late. She and the tall stranger devised a plan to gather evidence of the government's wrongdoing, to expose the truth once and for all. They decided to break into the facility at night, determined to find documents that would reveal the extent of the government's experiments. Armed with flashlights and determination, they made their way through the dark woods, their hearts racing. As they approached the building, Emily felt a sense of dread wash over her. The shadows seemed to dance in the moonlight, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Once inside, they navigated through the debris, searching for anything that could prove the government's involvement. But the deeper they went, the more they felt a sense of unease. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from behind them, and Emily's heart raced. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The stranger nodded, his expression tense. "We need to hurry." They pressed on, finally discovering a hidden room filled with documents and equipment. As Emily rifled through the papers, her blood ran cold. There were plans for further experiments, details about the weapon designed to eradicate towns like Maplewood. "This is it," she breathed, adrenaline coursing through her veins. But just as they were about to leave, the door swung open, and armed agents flooded the room. "Hands up," one of them shouted, their guns trained on Emily and the stranger. Panic surged through her as they raised their hands. "We're just looking for answers," Emily shouted, her voice shaking. The agents exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. "You've uncovered too much. You need to come with us." Emily felt her heart pound in her chest. "No, we won't let you silence us." Just as they were about to be apprehended, the stranger lunged forward, knocking an agent off balance. Chaos erupted as Emily seized the opportunity, darting for the exit. "Go," the stranger shouted, his voice filled with urgency. Emily sprinted outside, her heart racing as she glanced back to see the agents pursuing them. She dashed into the woods, adrenaline propelling her forward. As she ran, she heard shouts behind her, the sound of footsteps growing closer. "You can't escape," one of the agents yelled. But Emily didn't look back. She couldn't afford to slow down. She had to warn the others. Bursting into the town hall, Emily gasped for breath, her heart pounding. The townspeople turned to her, confusion and fear etched on their faces. "They're coming. We have to prepare." "What happened?" Tom asked, concern etched on his features. "I found evidence of the government's plans. They're trying to silence us." Panic rippled through the crowd. "What do we do?" someone shouted. "We stand together," Emily declared, her voice strong. "We're not backing down. We have to expose them." The townspeople rallied around her, determination shining in their eyes. They gathered supplies and formed a plan to barricade the town, ready to defend themselves against the impending threat. As night fell, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Emily felt a sense of resolve building within her. They were no longer just victims. They were fighters, ready to confront the government's tyranny. Hours passed, the silence broken only by distant sounds of vehicles approaching. Emily's heart raced as she watched the road, the shadows growing larger. Suddenly, headlights pierced the darkness, and a convoy of government vehicles rolled into town. "They're here," someone shouted, panic rising in the crowd. Emily stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Stay calm. We can't show fear." The vehicles stopped and armed agents stepped out, their expressions cold and determined. "You're making a mistake," one of them warned, his voice low and threatening. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself. "We know what you're doing. We're not afraid of you." The agent's expression hardened. "You don't understand the consequences of your actions. And you don't understand the power of unity," Emily shot back, her voice steady. The standoff hung in the air, tension crackling like electricity. The townspeople stood together, ready to fight for their home, their lives. Suddenly, the tall stranger emerged from the shadows, his expression fierce. "You don't have to do this. Let them go." "Why should we listen to you?" one of the agents sneered. "Because I know the truth. I know what you're hiding," he replied, his voice strong. "And you can't erase us. We will be heard." The agents exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Emily seized the moment, her voice rising. "We will not be silenced. We will fight for our home." With those words, the crowd erupted in cheers, their voices ringing out against the night. Emily felt a surge of hope as she watched her friends and neighbors stand united against the looming threat. The tension in the air was palpable as the townspeople stood their ground, ready to face the armed agents. Emily felt adrenaline coursing through her veins, determined to protect her home. "Listen up," an agent shouted, trying to regain control. "You're making a grave mistake. Stand down and we can resolve this peacefully." But Emily stepped forward, her heart racing. "You think we'll just back down? We know what you're planning, and we won't let you take our town." The agents exchanged wary glances, their resolve wavering. The tall stranger positioned himself beside Emily, his presence a solid anchor. "You think you can intimidate us into submission?" he challenged. "We won't be afraid of you anymore." With those words, the townspeople erupted in cheers, their voices rising like a wave. The agents hesitated, caught off guard by the show of unity and defiance. "Enough," one of the agents barked, stepping forward with authority. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Emily squared her shoulders, determination burning in her eyes. "And you have no idea what this town is capable of." Suddenly, the ground shook beneath their feet, and the air crackled with tension. Emily glanced around, sensing the chaos brewing. The agents seemed on edge, ready to act. "Get ready," Tom shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. "We need to protect ourselves." As the agents moved to apprehend them, Emily and the townspeople stood firm, their hearts united in a shared purpose. The atmosphere was electric, a battle brewing between the oppressors and the defenders. Just as the agents lunged forward, a loud explosion echoed from the direction of the facility, shaking the ground once more. The townspeople gasped, and the agents faltered, confusion spreading through their ranks. "What was that?" one of the agents shouted, turning toward the source of the noise. "It's now or never," Emily yelled, adrenaline propelling her forward. "We need to fight for our lives." With renewed determination, the townspeople surged forward, rallying together against the agents. The chaos erupted into a full-blown confrontation, the sound of shouting and gunfire filling the air. Emily fought her way through the chaos, dodging agents and trying to stay close to Sarah and the tall stranger. They were fighting not just for their town, but for their very existence. The clash intensified, the town becoming a battlefield as the government agents realized the depth of the townspeople's resolve. But Emily knew they had to hold on, to fight for what was right. The fight raged on, chaos enveloping Maplewood as the townspeople stood their ground against the armed agents. Emily felt her heart race as she fought alongside her neighbors, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We can't give up," she shouted, rallying the others as they pushed back against the agents. The air was thick with tension, and the sounds of conflict echoed through the night. In the midst of the chaos, Emily spotted Tom struggling with an agent. Without hesitation, she rushed to help, her fists clenched in determination. "Tom, I got you," she yelled, tackling the agent to the ground. "Thanks, Emily," Tom grunted, regaining his footing. But just as they regrouped, another explosion rocked the ground, sending debris flying through the air. The agent staggered, momentarily thrown off balance. "This is our chance," Emily shouted, leading the townspeople toward the government vehicles. As they reached the vehicles, they noticed a stack of boxes marked with the government seal. "What's in there?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowed. "Only one way to find out," Emily replied, determination shining in her eyes. They pried open a box, revealing documents detailing the experiments conducted at the facility, plans for future tests, and records of the townspeople's disappearances. Emily felt a surge of anger as she flipped through the pages, her heart racing. "This is it. We have the evidence," she exclaimed, clutching the documents tightly. "We can expose them." But just then, the agents regrouped, their faces set with grim determination. "You think you can walk away with that?" one of them snarled, brandishing his weapon. Emily felt her heart race as she glanced around, the townspeople rallying together. "We won't back down. This is our home." With those words, the townspeople surged forward, fighting back against the agents with newfound strength. Emily felt a rush of adrenaline as they pushed the agents back, determined to protect their town. As the battle raged on, the atmosphere in Maplewood shifted. The townspeople were no longer just fighting to defend themselves. They were united by a common cause, a desire to reclaim their home and expose the truth. "Keep pushing," Emily shouted, her voice ringing out above the chaos. "We can't let them take our town." The agents were relentless, but the townspeople fought back with everything they had. Emily felt the adrenaline coursing through her, fueled by a fierce determination to protect her community. In the midst of the chaos, she spotted Sarah, cornered by two agents. Without thinking, Emily charged forward, adrenaline propelling her. "Get away from her," she yelled, tackling one of the agents to the ground. "Thanks, Emily," Sarah gasped, quickly getting back to her feet. But their victory was short-lived as more agents poured in, their numbers overwhelming. Emily felt a surge of panic as she glanced around, searching for a way to turn the tide. "Tom, we need to regroup," she shouted, spotting him nearby. But just as she called out, another explosion rocked the ground, sending shockwaves through the air. Emily stumbled, feeling the heat of the blast wash over her. "What's happening?" she shouted, looking toward the facility. "We need to get out of here," Tom yelled, urgency in his voice. But before they could move, the agents launched another offensive, pushing the townspeople back. Emily felt the pressure mounting, the weight of fear and uncertainty pressing down on her. "We can't let them win," she cried, rallying the others. "This is our home. We can't back down now." With renewed determination, the townspeople pressed forward, their voices ringing out in defiance. Emily felt a surge of strength, fueled by the unity around her. As dawn broke over Maplewood, the battle between the townspeople and the government agents reached a fever pitch. Emily's heart raced as she fought alongside her neighbors, determination burning bright within her. "Keep pushing, we can't let them take our home," she shouted, her voice ringing out above the chaos. The agents, realizing they were losing ground, began to retreat. Emily felt a surge of hope. "We're winning, don't give up." But just as they pressed forward, a loud horn blared in the distance. Emily turned to see a convoy of news vans approaching, reporters spilling out with cameras rolling. "Get back," one of the agents shouted, panic etched on his face. "You're not allowed here." Emily seized the moment. "We have evidence. We need to show them," she shouted to the reporters, waving the documents she had found. The reporters rushed forward, their cameras capturing the chaos unfolding in front of them. "What's happening here?" one of them asked, pointing the camera at Emily. "They're trying to cover up their experiments. They're attacking our town," Emily shouted, her voice filled with passion. The agents faltered, their focus shifting as the media descended on them. The tides were turning, and Emily felt a surge of hope as the truth began to unfold before their eyes. "Get the footage. This is a story we can't ignore," one of the reporters yelled, capturing the confrontation on camera. As the battle raged on, the presence of the media shifted the dynamics. The agents began to retreat, overwhelmed by the scrutiny of the cameras and the determination of the townspeople. "Push them back," Emily yelled, her heart racing. "This is our chance." With renewed vigor, the townspeople surged forward, their voices ringing out in defiance. They had the truth on their side, and they wouldn't back down. The morning sun cast a golden hue over Maplewood as the dust settled, the battle finally coming to an end. The government agents, overwhelmed by the townspeople and the media presence, retreated, leaving behind a scene of chaos. Emily stood amidst the rubble, her heart racing as she processed the events of the last few hours. She had fought alongside her neighbors, united by a common purpose. They had stood their ground against an oppressive force, and together they had prevailed. As the reporters began interviewing the townspeople, capturing their stories and the evidence Emily had uncovered, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The truth was finally coming to light. "Emily, over here," a reporter called, waving her over. Emily approached, her heart racing with anticipation. "What's going to happen now?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. "We'll make sure your story is heard. This is just the beginning," the reporter replied, determination shining in her eyes. In the days that followed, the news coverage of the incident exploded, drawing national attention to Maplewood. Emily felt a sense of empowerment as the townspeople rallied together, sharing their stories and demanding justice. The government was forced to respond, and investigations were launched into the facility and its experiments. As the truth unraveled, the townspeople found their voices, demanding accountability for the devastation they had endured. But amidst the chaos, Emily felt a sense of loss. The tall stranger had vanished in the aftermath of the battle, leaving behind only questions and uncertainty. Weeks passed, and life in Maplewood slowly began to rebuild. The town was forever changed, marked by the scars of the battle, but Emily felt a renewed sense of hope as they worked together to restore their community. In the midst of the rebuilding, Emily often found herself reflecting on the events that had transpired. She remembered the tall stranger and the role he had played in exposing the truth. She wished she could have spoken to him one last time, to understand the depth of his knowledge and the reasons behind his actions. One day, as she walked through the remnants of the town, she stumbled upon a familiar figure standing at the edge of the woods. It was the tall stranger, his expression pensive as he watched the town. "Why did you leave?" Emily called, her heart racing. He turned, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "I had to. You have to protect this town, and I can't risk being caught." "But we need your help," Emily pleaded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "We can't do this without you." He shook his head, a flicker of regret in his eyes. "You're stronger than you know, Emily. You've sparked a movement, and now it's up to you to lead it." With those words, he stepped back into the shadows of the woods, leaving Emily with a sense of resolve. She understood now, the fight for Maplewood was far from over. In the months that followed, Maplewood became a symbol of resilience and unity. The townspeople worked tirelessly to rebuild their community, their spirits unyielding despite the challenges they faced. Emily took on a leadership role, organizing community meetings and advocating for the town's needs. She felt a sense of purpose as they fought for justice, their voices echoing across the nation. One day, while addressing a crowd gathered in the town square, she felt a surge of energy. "We are Maplewood. We will not be silenced. We will fight for our future." The townspeople cheered, their voices rising in unison, a chorus of determination and hope. But deep down, Emily knew that the fight was far from over. The government's actions had far-reaching implications, and they had to remain vigilant. As she stood before her community, she couldn't shake the feeling that the tall stranger was still watching, guiding her from the shadows. She felt a sense of purpose, a calling to protect Maplewood and ensure its survival. The future was uncertain, but Emily knew one thing for sure. They would face whatever challenges lay ahead together as a united front. The echoes of the past would not define them. Instead, they would pave the way for a new dawn. Epilogue: The Legacy of Maplewood. Years later, as Emily looked out over the rebuilt town of Maplewood, she felt a profound sense of pride. The scars of the past had healed, replaced by a vibrant community determined to thrive. The fight for justice had sparked a movement, one that continued to resonate across the nation. Emily had become a voice for the voiceless, advocating for communities affected by government negligence and corruption. As she walked through the town, she spotted familiar faces, friends and neighbors who had fought alongside her during the darkest days. Together, they had forged a legacy of resilience and unity. But even as they celebrated their victories, Emily remained vigilant. The threat of corruption and secrecy still lingered, a reminder of the battles fought and the lives lost. One evening, as the sun set over Maplewood, Emily stood at the edge of the woods, her heart heavy with memories of the past. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see the tall stranger standing there, a knowing smile on his face. "You did it," he said, pride shining in his eyes. "You've made a difference." Emily felt a surge of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." He nodded, his expression serious. "But the fight isn't over. Stay vigilant. There are always shadows lurking." With those words, he stepped back into the woods, disappearing as mysteriously as he had come. Emily watched him go, feeling a sense of resolve swell within her. She turned back to the town, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Maplewood was more than just a town. It was a testament to the strength of its people, a reminder that they would never back down in the face of adversity. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emily knew one thing for certain. They were ready to fight for their future, united and unyielding, forever echoing the spirit of Maplewood.